morning. The Chief Executive will first say a few words and then the floor will be open to questions. Chief Executive. Good morning. In the past 2 weeks or so, we could see that the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases remains high. It ranges between it hovers between 8,000 to 11,000. Yesterday, it was over 9,000 cases. So the number remains high, and there are several points I'd like to repeat. First of all, the public healthcare system is affected. Now, 30% of the general services have been converted to services to cater to the pandemic. So in terms of the capacity of the public healthcare system, we need to ensure that it's sufficient. Secondly, the number of cases shows that the high-risk groups will face a higher risk because that includes the older and the young and the chronically ill. So in that respect, we still need to take various measures to ensure that we're able to keep the epidemic under control. We must also keep cutting off the transmission chains and reduce the number of transmission chains so that we could keep the number of confirmed cases down, and then we will see a declining trend of cases. But of course, it's just after the Mid-Autumn Festival, and we know that there are many activities. There were many activities during the festival, so we have to monitor very closely the trend of the epidemic. Now, for measures to be considered by the government, of course, we have to take a look at the bigger picture. We know, of course, that we need to have normal activities in the community. We need to have economic activities. We need to keep our competitive edge. But then also from the point of view of the government, we need to ensure that our public healthcare system could cope and it could function normally. This is to ensure the safety of lives and public health. At the same time, we need to protect the high-risk groups, including the old and the young and the other high-risk groups. So that's why when we formulate policies, we have to have regard to the trend of the epidemic and various data before we make any decision. Now, after we have taken various measures, you could see that the number of confirmed cases went up from a few thousand some time ago to some 10,000 cases now. So we have launched various measures to try to keep the epidemic under control, but still we're seeing an increase in number of cases. So we cannot let down our guard. We have to bear in mind that the situation remains critical. So that's why I hope you will appreciate the balance we need to strike in taking forward various measures. And also vaccination is the best protection for individuals and the community in terms of our immunity barrier. Because with vaccination, data shows that that will seriously reduce the risk of mild cases becoming serious cases, and serious cases becoming critical cases or even death cases. So that's why vaccination is important. We need to take 3 doses of vaccine to give our protection and give the community protection. If the vaccination rate is high for the entire community, that will be the foundation for us to have better chances to return to normal life. So please do not hesitate. And because if you hesitate, maybe you will become infected, and you won't want to see your condition deteriorating. Now, in the past few months, we've seen young children being infected and becoming serious cases some even passed away. So there are some 20, 30 serious to critical cases and a few fatality cases. So please don't hesitate. Some are hesitating because they believe that COVID is like the flu, but the body of data tells us that's not true. Now, in terms of fatality rate, during previous flu peak season, the death number is about 300, but then for the fifth wave of the COVID pandemic, already some 9,000 people passed away. So we are talking about 300 cases versus 9,000 cases. The difference is 350 times. Now, the fatality rate is 0.1% usually for flu, but it's 0.6% for COVID, so it's 6 times more. That's the second point. Third point, now after people recover from flu, they will be back to normal. There won't be any lingering effect. But then for COVID-19, as you know, there are long COVID symptoms. And with long COVID, that means that our nervous system may have been damaged, and we may have poor memory, poor concentration, and there could be shortness of breath. And if children have been affected, it's possible that organs could be damaged. So we have seen that in many medical reports and analysis. So with COVID-19 in particular, Omicron, it is not just any normal flu. Please don't hesitate. Take the jab, and that's the best protection for you. And it will be the best protection for the whole community to fight the epidemic. Now the floor is open to questions. As you ask questions, please use the microphone we give you. And also please identify the organization you represent. Each reporter should ask no more than 2 questions. Over to the right there. I'm from Now TV. Good morning, Chief Executive. Now, there are mainland netizens claim that they did not take the vaccine, but they were able to come to Hong Kong, and they got the vaccine pass, they got the blue codes, they were able to enter premises. So is the government aware of the situation? How come there is this loophole? How would you regulate the situation? Secondly, in Singapore, there will be a fintech festival in November. It clashes with Hong Kong's event, so they're trying to take business away from us. Now, as Hong Kong continues with the quarantine measures, how are we able to compete with Singapore? Would you adopt the advice of experts that is 7 days, of medical surveillance with everyday RAT tests and PCR tests every other day? Now, third point, you issued a statement in response to the passing away of the Queen. Would you be sending someone to the funeral? First question, for mainlanders not having to get vaccinated come to Hong Kong, well, that's been a policy for a long time. The main reason is that the mainland has the lowest infection risks around the world. You know that. In terms of controlling the epidemic, the mainland has the lowest risk around the world. So the risk of infection there is much lower than that in Hong Kong. And that's why in implementing the policy, well, we've been doing that for a long time. But of course, we keep monitoring the epidemic situation, and we'll see if there are other factors to consider. But then, for the time being, given the risk level, and we have not seen any imported cases as a result of this policy. Second point, now we're going to have the FinTech Summit. This is something we've been hosting for some time. Hong Kong still maintains its competitive edge, and we remain strong in this respect. And now many leaders of the community industry have talked to us. They're interested in attending the summit. But of course, we have to consider the fact that our epidemic situation may not be the same as that in another place. And so we may have to adopt certain measures. And as I explained, because we have a high number of confirmed cases, so we need to make sure that we could protect our public healthcare system and the high-risk groups. And we keep analyzing data, and we keep monitoring the situation. We'll have regard to the actual situation in deciding on our infection control measures. We believe we will be able to host a successful FinTech summit. And in the long run, what measures can we take? Say the current quarantine measure rule of 3+4, will there be any changes? We will have to monitor the data and the trend. As I said earlier, vaccination is best protection for individuals and the community as a whole, especially for the high-risk groups. If they have there is a high vaccination rate, then we'll be able to resume normal activities in the community. There's a better chance of doing that. So please don't hesitate. You could protect yourself, and at the same time, it is your civic duty to help the community fight the epidemic. Your fourth question, could you repeat that, please? Now, when the Queen passed away, you issued a statement. So are you going to send a delegation to the funeral? Yes, the SL government will send a suitable representative. Next, please, the lady in blue.
Mr. Lee, so first, I'm Nadia from SCMP. So do you agree with the respiratory experts' view that the daily COVID caseload has already peaked last week? Is Hong Kong ready for further opening up? Or do you think that the social distancing or quarantine measures should be tightened, as you have said in your opening remark? And how would you respond to some respiratory experts that they were upset about the black and white rules that require them to avoid sharing opinions that are conflicting to the government policy? And second, since Shenzhen has cut the quarantine hotel quota for Hong Kong, while the reverse quarantine arrangement has yet to be implemented. So do you agree that the situation is even worse than before? And how would you help the business travelers and families who need to cross the border? Thank you.
In the past few weeks, the daily COVID cases number hover at 8,000 to 10,000.
The number of cases in the last few weeks range between 8,000 to 11,000. It came down to about 8,000 yesterday, but since we just passed Mid-Autumn Festival, so we have to monitor the situation. I have explained times and again that the government measures to be taken against the epidemic takes into consideration of two very important factors. First is to ensure that our hospital service will remain functionable. We can cope with the rising number of cases, because with rising number of cases, there will be a rising number of hospitalization. The second thing we need to take into consideration is protection of those in need. And these people in need included the very young and elderly, who are high-risk group, plus people who have chronic disease. Any measures that this government take, while very conscious of the need of society returning to normal activities and economy allowing to develop, plus ensuring Hong Kong's competitiveness, the government cannot turn a blind eye to these two very facts, that the hospital has already cut 30% of its service in order to deal with the COVID epidemic. And also, the high-risk groups are under real threat to their health and to their life, because vaccination rate for these high-risk groups is still unsatisfactory. So whilst we are very conscious of ensuring that society can go back to day-to-day life as freely as possible, economy to grow, and competitiveness to be ensured, we have to balance the need with the risks. We will be monitoring the situation very closely and looking at the data. But what is important is vaccination helps a lot, not just protecting one's health and life. It also helps a lot in ensuring the whole society can be protected from the attack. So vaccination is a must go for everybody. It's a must happen for everybody. It's a must do for everybody, not just for himself, herself, but for society as a whole. And the vaccination is important because people should not just think that COVID is a normal flu, because if you look at our figures, we have lost 9,000 lives just because of Omicron, when every year we lost about 300 odd lives because of flu. And also the death rate for flu is 0.1%, but for Omicron is 0.6%. That means 6 times more risky. And there are also the problem of long corona symptoms, which includes loss of memory, loss of concentration, and also attack at our nervous system. For children, it may also result in organ damage. So it is important for everybody to know that vaccination is the best protection for everybody. And when vaccination reaches a high level for all age group, then there will be a lot more freedom and liberty for us to consider. That's important. And as regard our discussion with experts in the expert panel, we welcome, of course, different opinions, and we always exchange views freely. But we also want to inform the public of decisions that the government made clearly and precisely, so that there will be no mixed messages, so that people will not be confused with what government wants to do and the rationality behind the government decision. Similarly, for anything that is discussed in government, whether between myself and with my team, we of course have an open and frank discussion to look at the pros and cons, and then we make a decision. And as we make the decision, the government will announce the decision in clear and precise messages, so that the government communication with society achieve the purpose of informing them correctly, clearly, and understandably, without mixing of messages. As regard Shenzhen reducing the number of the number in the quota for Hong Kong to go to Shenzhen, this is, as I know, as a result of the situation in Shenzhen and the need to ensure that they can control their situation within their assessment. What I intend to do, as I've explained, is to create a system which in the long run, however the situation of the pandemic develops on either side of the boundary, the system can continue to ensure that it will proceed without big changes. That is why we have suggested implemented the concept of reverse quarantine or pre-quarantine. This is, as you know, in progress, and the Chief Secretary has been in communication with the Mayor of Shenzhen. There are a lot of challenges, of course, to overcome, but I think through communication, eventually we will be able to achieve some sort of arrangement. The standards, of course, will have to be endorsed by the Shenzhen authorities because they are the authorities who will be exempting the 7+3 requirement after a person has fulfilled his reverse quarantine requirements in Hong Kong. So I'm aiming at creating a system which will continue to operate however the situation develops on either side of the boundary. And we are working hard towards that goal.
時間關係，我哋答埋。
Because of time, let's take the last question for today. The lady in blue. Good morning, Chief Executive. I'm from TVB. Yesterday night, the government has announced that the Sai Kung Outdoor Recreation Center would be used for quarantine center for smallpox, for monkeypox patients. So how would you assess the trend? There may be other virus other than monkeypox that are coming into Hong Kong. So what will the governments do? Now, in terms of reverse quarantine, now the task force has met with the Shenzhen authority. The quota offered by Shenzhen, however, was only 1,000. Now, this seems to be a regression. So what is the discussion progress between the two governments? What will the quota be? Now, last week, a man admitted to a mercy killing of his wife. Now, once again, there are discussions concerning patients who have chronic illnesses and are not receiving support from the government. So what will be the government's decision on this? Now, first question on monkeypox. For any transmissible disease, we are on high alert always. On monkeypox, according to experts, the transmission cause is through a bodily contact. That would be the most direct way of contracting monkeypox. It is not airborne, like Omicron. We cannot let our guard down. In terms of preparation, we will make sure that there is enough medicines and vaccinations for the disease. The government has done that already. And also we have identified quarantine centers dedicated to possible outbreaks. So we are controlling the risk. The public needs not worry about the outbreak of another virus. So we will be on high alert in terms of ensuring that our healthcare system can cope with virus like Omicron and monkeypox. Back in the SARS days, we have already enhanced the system as well as the capability of our fight against virus. So we will be able to deal with a possible monkeypox situation. Now, in terms of the reverse or quarantine arrangements with the Shenzhen government, my goal is to establish a system which can continue to operate normally, no matter how the situation develops on both places. This will be a stable and lasting system with certainty. The system will be able to run continuously so that Hong Kong residents can enter the mainland through the system. Of course, the ultimate goal is that after pre-quarantine or reverse quarantine arrangements, travelers will no longer need to fulfill the 3+7 quarantine requirements in Shenzhen. So we have to have our system endorsed by the Shenzhen government. Discussion has already begun. Simply put, I hope that the system is independent of the development of the epidemic. The system would run under the principle of preventing importation of cases to Shenzhen. So for the quarantine period required by Shenzhen, we hope travelers can complete them in Hong Kong, and it will not add to the risk of exporting cases into the mainland. So the system can run independent of the development of the epidemic. And of course, concerning the manslaughter case, I'm greatly saddened. This is a tragedy that no one wants to see. Now, concerning the issue of
嘅能力，
euthanasia, well, our healthcare system is capable of helping patients to overcome many diseases and challenges. So at present, we would look at how we can enhance our treating capability and our healthcare system. Please understand that in dealing with different issues, the government has to take into account different views in the society. Now, the epidemic has brought about a lot of pressure in terms of mentally and physically to the public. The government is rendering support to patients. The hospital authority is supporting patients. There are lots of district organizations, NGOs, and medical groups which are offering psychological help to the public. We will work together to offer the support needed to the public. Thank you.